A distinct difference between the waist and hips has been a central feature in women's beauty standards for centuries. Today, the waist-to-hip ratio remains a constant standard for all body types. Regardless of size, the more well-defined a woman's waist, compared to her hips, the more her body shape is perceived as attractive. The waist-to-hip ratio is also a well-established health measurement. The smaller your waist when compared to your hips, the lower your risk of chronic conditions like heart disease and diabetes. So how closely does having a beautiful form relate to your long-term health? A waist about 2/3 the size of your hips gives you the classic ideal beauty standard, like the well-known measurements of a 24-inch waist with 36-inch hips. But you don't have to reach the ideal for optimal health benefits. According to a 2018 study, the lowest health risks are for those with a waist at about 3/4 of their hips or smaller, which would be a 27.5-inch waist if you have 36-inch hips. A waist 4/5 of your hips is still low risk. This would be a 29-inch waist if you have 36-inch hips. Notice how the numbers change if you have wider hips. For comparison, the average woman has a 39-inch waist and 43-inch hips. Calculate your waist-to-hip ratio by dividing your waist by your hip circumference. To see your health risk score, find your hip circumference in the left column and scan to the right to find your waist. The average woman, represented by the star on the chart, has nearly 2 times the risk of having a heart attack compared to a woman with optimal measurements, according to a 2018 study. Scientists believe the increased health risk observed in people with larger waists is due to a higher concentration of fat around the internal organs. When you measure your waist, stand upright and maintain normal tension in your midsection. Don't try to suck your waist in or let your belly hang out. Measure yourself at the level of your navel, turning to the side to make sure the tape is level, not at an angle, all the way around. The tape should fit evenly, contacting the skin around your waist without pinching. Repeat 2 or 3 times to make sure you have the correct measurement. When you measure your hips, run the tape around the widest part of your hips. This should be near the mid-buttocks. The tape should run horizontally and fit evenly, contacting the skin around your hips or your garment without pinching. For the most accurate results, measure yourself in no more than 1 thin layer of clothing, and repeat 2 to 3 times. You may have seen other videos and articles online that call for measuring at the narrowest point of the waist. The reference data for our health standards comes from research using measurements at the navel. Also, please try to avoid sucking in your abdominals to get a better measurement. If this becomes a habit, it leads to excessive tension in these muscles, which can cause back pain and dysfunctional breathing patterns. Men don't have a known ideal hip measurement for attractiveness, but their optimal waist-to-hip ratio is 0.87 or lower, like a 34.5-inch waist with 39.5-inch hips. An extra inch on your waist would still be low risk. We don't have current reference data for men's hip circumference, but we can use the average measurement from 30 years ago, which was 39.5 inches. Pairing this measurement with the current average waist gives us a 1.02 waist-to-hip ratio. According to a 2019 study, an average man has over a 50% greater risk of death due to cardiovascular disease than a peer with optimal measurements. Waist-to-hip ratio research has established a proven health advantage, regardless of size, to have a relatively small waist compared to your hip circumference. Other studies show health benefits from a smaller size overall. Research on waist circumference and waist-to-height ratio will give us more clarity. Waist circumference research reveals that for each inch lost from her waist, the average woman improves her risk of premature death by 6 to 7%. For men, it's 8%. Waist-to-height ratio has been shown to impact healthy longevity, and the target is simple. A waist less than half your height will lower your health risks. Research across the globe showed consistent results, regardless of bone structure or body type. Look up your height and waist on this chart to see where you currently score. For example, data from a 2013 study shows that a 5'6" woman with a 44-inch waist would live 3 years less than a peer with equal height and a 37-inch waist. Even incremental improvements in a woman's waistline can have a remarkable impact. The men's chart shows similar benefits for having a smaller waist circumference. According to research, a 6-foot-tall male with a 44-inch waist would expect to live 2 years less than a peer with equal height and a 40-inch waist. Combining the research data, we can see the potential health advantages over time for the average person who can be consistent with a healthy weight loss program. If the average woman loses 3.5 inches from her waist, she joins a group that lives a year longer. 2 inches beyond that, and she reaches the threshold for a 36% lower risk of death. If she goes the other way and adds a ½ inch to her waist, she joins a group expected to live 1 year less. 3 additional inches take away another year and increase her death risk by 46%. If the average man loses 2 inches from his waist, he joins a group that lives a year longer. 2.5 inches beyond that, and he reaches the threshold for a 36% lower risk of death. If he goes the other way and adds 1.5 inches to his waist, he joins a group expected to live 1 year less. The research data on waist-to-hip ratio, waist circumference, and waist-to-height ratio seems comprehensive for covering the health effects of body fat in the midsection. But what about excess fat in the hips, thighs, and lower legs? This condition, called lipedema, is much more common in women than in men. From a health risk standpoint, studies have not shown a direct link between lipedema and increased risks of chronic disease or premature death. Having excess fat below the waist appears to be less risky than carrying excess fat around the waist. However, it's a small minority who have excess fat only below the waist. 80% of lipedema cases are in obese people. A cause for concern either way is how heavy legs may limit their overall ability to exercise. If you're not used to being active, the most effective starting point for weight and fat loss is to add light intensity exercise throughout your day. For example, a 170-pound man sitting in a chair burns 18 calories every 10 minutes. If he gets up to sweep, vacuum, or go for a walk, he will burn up to 3 times the calories. When done regularly, even in short bursts through the day, light activity adds up to more calorie burn than you might imagine. Here are the 10-minute calorie burn rates for 18 commonly used light and moderate activities. Vigorous activities burn significantly more calories, but they're also harder to sustain for a long duration. For a person who isn't used to exercise, it's possible to gradually add active hobbies, sports, or workout sessions into your weekly schedule, starting at twice a week or every other day. Build an active lifestyle that's enjoyable and doable, and you're much more likely to find a way to keep it on your schedule for the long term, where it will make a real difference. Waist and hip measurements identify excess body fat and the need for weight loss. Once you know you need to lose weight, you can also use body mass index research data for setting your goals. The risk of high blood pressure, diabetes, arthritis, chronic pain, disability, and other conditions were all studied by BMI. Find out your target weight to lower your health risks in this video. In the meantime, subscribe to this channel, then you won't miss any upcoming videos on health, exercise, and fitness. See you next time.